Hey guys, welcome to the Enlightened Logger channel. Thanks for stopping by and checking us out. This channel is dedicated to healing through hard work. We'll talk about everything from addiction to zeal for the outdoors. I tell people that I don't know how to act without a chainsaw in hand, so you've been warned. Let's get to it. The Black Diamond Heat. This is going to be a starter video for a Hitzer 5093 coal stove. There's a lot of different methods to use. I personally like to use starting with a wood fire method. Get a good base and a good bed of coals and a good amount of chunks of wood on fire, and then add coal slowly and layer it in accordingly. I'm going to start with some papers and some small kindling just to get the ball rolling here, and I'm going to cheat and I'm going to use a torch. Kind of wad up some papers here. Again, very similar to what you would do with a wood stove or a fireplace. This stove, being one of the largest of the standalone stoves, has a very large burn chamber, so the more the merrier. Don't be bashful. Load it right up. Then you want to start with your really small pieces because they're going to ignite a lot easier. And then once you get those caught on fire, then you can add some larger pieces. It's always wise to make sure and do a clean out, any vacuuming that you have to do, or check your chimney, make sure that's clean before the beginning of the season. I'm assuming that you've already done all of that, so we don't have any videos on that right now. This is just going to be a starter video. Here's my handy torch here. A little bit cold from sitting outside. Cheat. Switch to matches. Okay, as you can see, I've got the bottom door open for additional draft and draft control. Being that this is a coal burning stove, they'll burn wood okay, because they have so much additional air, but you're going to get some creosote buildup in there just because they don't reburn the fuel like the newer wood stoves do with their catalytic converters and their regen system. So you want to make sure and keep the air right to it, and if you're going to be burning wood in these stoves, you want to make sure and clean your glass off occasionally so you actually get to enjoy the fire. I'm going to add in a little bit more here. And this is a good opportunity as well to talk about the beginning of the season fires. Starting small with small stuff like this, having a fire extinguisher kicking around close by is always handy. And this also gives you the opportunity as well to go outside and double check, make sure the smoke is coming out the chimney properly, etc. And the reason I say that is because around here we deal with a lot of nesting birds, whether it's starlings, robins, whatever. They like to get into these pipes and they make nests, and even if you've cleaned it out in the spring, let's say, when the season was over with, doesn't mean they haven't gotten back in there and made nests since then. So it's a good opportunity to do that with a small fire, and if you had to put it out, you can. So here we've got some little bit larger stuff. Everything I'm using right now is all hardwood. You can use softwood if you want. Obviously the softer woods, your pine and some of your aspen and the like, they just tend to burn up a little bit faster, but they also get to the point where they ignite and develop coals faster too. So really it doesn't much matter what you're using. Being that I'm a firewood dealer, I've got lots of hardwood kicking around, so that's just what I'm using. So we kind of layer this in slowly the same way you do a standard wood stove, and cross them, if you can see in the picture here. That will allow the flames to build and the airflow to get through the bottom. So as you can see, the flames are growing pretty good. It means the wood's fairly dry, and obviously the smaller pieces enable that to grow that much faster. So I'm just going to throw on a few more chunks of the small kindling, and then I'm going to put on some larger pieces as well and let them get going. And as you can see, I'm starting to fill up the bottom here, the shaker grates. That's going to give me more of a platform to build off of when I go to pour the coal in to get that ignited. Really, the more coals, the more fire you have in there, you know, more wood you have on fire, the better. Trying to put coal on top of a small fire like this, really not going to work out so well. There's a good chance you're just going to smother it and kill the fire. So don't hold back. I always recommend putting in a large amount here to at least get you up and rolling. And you can see you're going to get some smoke billowing out the top because, again, typically a coal fire, you're going to be loading from the top, and the exhaust is already leaving the burn chamber at that point and going up the chimney. So, being that we're just starting with wood, you're going to get a little bit of smoke throughout the house. So just as a warning to you, to be prepared that your smoke alarms might go off. So as we get this up and rolling here, just going to give you a little description of who we are and what we do. At Black Diamond Heat, we sell Hitzer and key stoker stoves, furnaces, and boilers. We sell Lehigh anthracite coal as well as Blashack coal. We are Timberwolf dealers. They build firewood processing equipment, log splitters, conveyors, processors, etc. And we also sell firewood, cut, split, and delivered. We're in the process of expanding and taking on new partners all the time, so we're always looking for good products and services to add. Very soon we're going to have some wood pellets as well. Looking to expand this next year into wood stoves and pellet stoves. Now you've got a little history on us. Black Diamond Heat's been servicing the area for about 5.5 years. I purchased the business almost exactly a year ago. So now we've got a full heating season under our belt and the beginning of another one. Last year was a real tough one to gauge because it was fairly mild winter here in upstate New York. Wasn't super cold and we didn't have a lot of snow. So we didn't really know what to expect. This year, however, things are going to be a little different. Being that we had a mild winter and a very hot sunny summer, the lake is a lot warmer than normal, and that's what affects the majority of our winter here is Lake Ontario. So we're expecting a lot of lake effect snow this year. You can hear that sizzle of the wood. That's just the moisture escaping from the wood as it heats up and starts to ignite. And you could hear the stove starting to crackle and pop a little bit. You're going to hear the metal expand some. And it'll only be probably another 5 minutes or so, and we're going to put our first layer of coal on. I'm going to use some gloves here since we're starting to get some heat produced now. You can, if you could see down there, in there, you can see some coals. So we're going to add some more of these guys here. Throw a couple of sticks here crossways. And again, some larger stuff in here. And I've always found when I'm starting these coal fires that doing this method is a little bit slower, but it works for me every time and I don't have to stop and restart. So I like to make sure I've got two things. That I've got coals in the bottom formed and I've got some larger chunks on top but on fire. So these that I just put in here, I'm going to give a couple of minutes to get them up and rolling. And once they're on fire, I should be able to start to put my first layer of coal in. And layers can be done depending on the size stove you have or the type of stove you have. Layers are done differently. This has a hopper in it, so when I open the top, you'll see I open the top lid to the stove. I'm gonna dump it in with a bag, and I just kind of eyeball it just to see, make sure I've got a thin layer there, but I haven't completely smothered my fire. And that to me is where having the coals and the larger chunks on fire both help. Because with the coals, they can be smothered out pretty quickly, but if you've got the larger chunks on fire, you've got enough airflow in there, and it helps space everything out enough that the coal isn't going to completely smother it. Again, everybody has different methods. This is just one that's worked for me. I've used it in 5 different Hitzer stoves at this point, and a Key Stoker hand-fired stove. You can use it with or without the hopper. I know a lot of people take these, they take the hopper out for spring and fall because it's coal being so many more BTUs is so much hotter than wood and any other fuel that it's probably going to blast you out of your house. Your wife is going to love it, but you're going to be running around in your skivvies. A lot more smoke that time. And that's just because of those pieces we put in are a little damp. We've had over 18 inches of rain here in the month of October, which is a lot for us. Normally the fall is pretty rainy, but that's just a lot of rain for us. So the wood, even though it's cut and piled out there, is pretty wet. We're gonna let this get going. And while that's rocking, I'm gonna run out and grab a bag of coal. Here, we're going to open her up. You can see the fire's going pretty good. You can hear a lot of the sound from the pipe expanding in the back. The stove was popping earlier, but now we've got a pretty good fire. Yeah. Always want to be careful of any extra flames or little sparks that are flying out. But if you dump this in, just go slowly. Alright, so I put in maybe 1/3 of a bag. Didn't put in a lot. That bag was open to begin with. I'll shut this back down for a minute. You can see the top layer of coal is very dark, obviously. It's kind of smoky, but you can still see the flames in the back. That's these larger chunks being on fire still, so you didn't completely smother it. You can hear the coal crackling in there, which means it's heating up. Coal is very oily, so it's going to ignite pretty easily. I chose to use pea coal in this. This stove will take pea coal or nut coal. I use pea coal just because it's a little bit smaller and it's easier to ignite. It's a little easier to get your first fire going. I always like to mix it in anyway. Mix in some pea, or you can even mix in some buck if you've got some larger pieces of nut, and even occasionally if you want to burn stove-sized coal or egg-sized coal, really big stuff. You can mix that in as well. You definitely want the smaller pieces though to help the fire ignite. So as it crackles and pops and gets going, our objective is to let this layer catch on fire. And fire for coal is different than wood. You're not going to see a large yellow flame. Coal is going to give you a blue flame. That's the gases burning off. So once you see the top layer here of your coal being red, that means it's on fire enough that you can add your second layer. Again, we're dumping it in very slowly so we don't smother the fire. We give it a chance to get up and running. We're just going to give this a few minutes here and we'll come back to you and add another layer. Okay, so we're going to add some Blashak nut coal now. One thing everybody loves about Blashak, you've got Santa Claus on the bag, but you've got handles. much easier to carry. So you can hear it crackling and snapping in there. We're going to add another pretty good layer here. One thing I want to caution you on is to make sure to not touch the bag on the stove, because obviously the stove is extremely hot at this point and the plastic will not fare very well. We're going to let this get going, and then really at this point you can do one of two things. You can just let it burn for a while and just keep your fire really small, or you can do what I'm going to do, and that's put about the rest of this bag in there. When you're first starting out your fire and you're filling the base of the stove, your burn chamber, and then starting to fill up the hopper, it usually takes a good couple of bags. So somewhere in the vicinity of 80 to 100 pounds you can put in one of these stoves. And of course that'll give you, depending on your settings and how you're burning it, somewhere in the vicinity of 24 hours burn time. You don't always have to fill your hopper. You can treat it more like a hand-fired unit where you're shoveling it in. So we're not gonna fill it all the way, but we're gonna let it get going, and we've got good red coals, and then we'll add the rest of this bag, and then we won't have to add any again until tonight when we get ready to leave, and then we'll kind of shake it and clean it up in the morning.